What's up, guys? John here. What Forbes predicted 4 years ago is quite shocking. The government takeover of rental housing all throughout America. This is on their website, Forbes.com. You can see it right there. This came out January 7th, 2020. And they said, what do I mean by nationalization of housing? I mean, by 2030, we could see a housing economy in which federal, state, and local governments set such limits on rental housing, its financing, development, and management, that in effect, government will own and operate most rental housing in the United States. But this isn't a drastic assessment or hyperbole. Here's why I think it isn't. This is what's going to happen. But when you look at what money market accounts are doing, and you look at, they have $6 trillion in money market accounts.
There's still so much money on the sidelines. There's now over $6 trillion in cash right now. That's eventually going to make its way back into the market.
You have family offices that are set to surpass hedge funds with $5.4 trillion in assets over the same timeline, over the next 4.5 years. And they go on to say that in total, wealth of family and with family offices is expected to top $9.5 trillion by then. So you start to kind of do the numbers here. You start to kind of look at the math. When 40%, a little more than 40% of all landlords in America are mom and pop, individuals, maybe they have a duplex, and they start walking into this changing world. Everything's getting more expensive. Taxes are getting more expensive. Insurance is getting more expensive. They can't push this cost onto the tenant. Those landlords are going to be in trouble, right? At least according to Forbes. But when you look at what they said here, they said that right here that there's going to be rent caps and limit on rental housing and rent caps, and you have now they're talking about a 5% rent cap, and they're talking about National Bill of Renters' Rights or Renters' Bill of Rights here in America.
The Biden administration says the president is taking action to lower housing costs.
If I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that rents are kept at 5% increase.
The Biden administration is planning to launch what they're calling a Renters' Bill of Rights.
And they have all these changes that are perfectly in line with this. It's very clear to me that everything is going to change, and these very deep-pocketed investors are going to be using their money to seize the opportunity that will be found inside of this change. In this video, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to give you the facts. Please hit the like button. Hit the like button. People share the content. Educate more people about what's really happening in the U.S. economy, the real economy. And if you'd like to fix your credit, we would love to help you at my company, GreatCreditFast.com. That's GreatCreditFast.com. If you have late payments, medical bills, charge-offs, foreclosures, bankruptcies, repossessions, or any negative or derogatory items on your credit report, go to GreatCreditFast.com. Click the link in the description just below this video. Schedule a free call tomorrow. Take a look at this. So, family offices are expected to add more than $2 trillion in assets by 2030, as an increase in wealth concentration and a revolution in wealth management drive rapid growth in new family offices. The number of single-family offices, the in-house investment in service firms of families typically worth 100 mil or more, is expected to rise from 8,000 to 10,720 by 2030, according to a report by Deloitte. Their assets are expected to grow even faster, topping 5.4 trillion by 2030, up from 3.1 trillion today, and more than double since 2019. In total, the wealth of families with family offices are expected to top 9.5 trillion by 2030, according to the report, more than doubling over the decade. So their wealth is just compounding. It's compounding. But the middle class is going through a different type of change here. The top 1% of Americans have taken 50 trillion from the bottom 90%, and that's made the U.S. less secure. Now, they'll put out all these articles about how they're going to solve this, but you have to realize the people that are saying they're going to solve this are filthy rich. Why would they want to solve it, right? Because the crazier things get, the more rich they get. It says, just look at the numbers here. Like, for example, money markets, they're sitting $6 trillion in cash, parked in money market. This is double the average for the past 30 years. Then you look at real median personal income in the United States, and it's right here, about $40,000, $41,000 almost. Then it's just basically flatlined. But then when you look at real household income, it is going down. 2019, it was $78,250. Now it's going down. I would probably bet that large part is because labor market's changing, and also a lot of relationships have went south, and a lot of wealth has left a lot of everyday American families, and I think that's likely going to continue, unfortunately. Especially as we start to walk into this AI, artificial intelligence, this fourth industrial revolution, we're going to see a lot of job displacement. We're going to see a lot of wages continuing to sink. So if you think about this, if wages are going to be going down in many fields, and a lot of change is going to be coming to rental housing, I mean, look at this here. They said, according to a report by JP Morgan Chase. There are 50 million residential rental units in the United States, but 41% of them belong to mom and pop landlords or individual investment landlords. In other words, mom and pop landlords oversee around 20.5 million rental properties in the US. So if they're talking about a takeover, I mean, this is Forbes' words. This isn't, anybody else's. Forbes is saying this. A government takeover of the rental housing market. If they're saying this, what is this going to mean? What is this going to mean for those 20,500,000 units? It's going to mean a lot of change. And I think a lot of these people are going to be losing their properties. It says and that's a sad thing because the American dream is, many would argue, is owning a 3-bed, 2-bath house, having a duplex, triplex, having a retirement plan, building all that out. But as they change things more and more and more, not many people are going to be able to hold on. Every little change is going to push more and more people over the edge. It says keeping a resolution is difficult, and so is making an accurate prediction on the time of the year ahead. I tend to avoid doing both at the new year, but I have a prediction about housing. The United States may see the nationalization of private rental housing by the end of the decade, though apparently desperate and incremental steps. Housing is becoming the new healthcare, the subject of fundamental debate about whether everyone should have access to it regardless of their ability to pay. The same exact verbiage is happening right now in California. The same exact verbiage. The ideological and economic implications of this debate are no less consequential to our future. Will we become a socialist country, or will we keep the free market? What do I mean by nationalization of housing? Right? And they go on to say, where the federal, state, and local governments set such limits on rental housing, it's financing, development, and management. Now, I think Section 8 housing, is going to be something that's going to explode in popularity as a lot of landlords try to move in that direction. But I think one of the big curveballs a lot of people aren't anticipating are going to be these green energy upgrades. A lot of areas, almost all of them throughout America, are moving in this direction to where by 2030 and by 2035 and 2040, they have to continue to make their buildings a little bit more green, a little bit better for the environment, bring them up to code and meet certain standards, all of which are not free, right? They come with a cost. So I would imagine Section 8 and some of these assets, we're going to likely see some of these changes unfolding, especially if you're getting money directly from them. That in effect, government will own and operate most rental housing in the United States, but this isn't a drastic or assessment or hyperbole. Here's why I think that. The premise, like healthcare or access to healthcare, those on the left are currently the housing is a human right, the National Economic and Social Rights Initiative. It's the government's obligation to guarantee that everyone can exercise this right to live in security, peace, and dignity. The book, Defense of Housing, argues against what it calls the commodification of housing, meaning the same thing. Everyone is entitled to some kind of housing. But then again, they would just be commoditizing it on the other end, right? So rent control began in New York City as part of an Emergency Price Control Act during World War II. Watch television. Now look, rent control, if you don't know what rent control is, it's not just in New York City. It's happening in LA, it's happening in San Francisco, and a couple of other markets. Rent control is a set of rules and guidelines enacted by local and state governments that will tell a landlord what he or she can or cannot do with their properties. This will modify their ability to evict a tenant, to increase rents, it basically turns the property owner, the landlord, into a property manager for the government. That's what it does. But it also reduces the supply of available housing. Developers don't want to enter a lot of these markets as freely as they would, let's call Phoenix or Nashville or in Austin. They'll just build over there. Which is, if that happened in a place like LA or San Francisco or New York City, you would likely see rents start to go down. You would start to see a lot more supply, and supply and demand dictate and determine price. So you would see that reflective for the tenant. It would be a better scenario for them overall. But when you look at what rent control actually does, many would argue is it keeps prices high and it makes things very, very challenging. It also, when you're a landlord in one of these markets, you have a tenant doesn't pay, it might cost you 20, 30, 40 grand or more to evict them. If it's in, let's call Florida or one of those other markets with no rent control, you can probably evict them for, sub $1,000. So, you take less risk, renting to that tenant. But, it just makes things very, very hard for an everyday person to get an affordable place to live in one of these expensive areas with rent control. So you start to look at what they're talking about, this commoditization or commodification of housing, how they're going to basically control it all. It's very concerning. They go on to say here that there are good people and bad people in the housing economy. Tenants are good and landlords are bad. In fact, I'm fond of ironically reminding my audience as real estate professionals when I speak to them that the media is on their scheme, making big money from evicting people and charging excessive fees, something from the Washington Post. I mean, I wouldn't say tenants are good and landlords are bad. I'd say, it's a mixed bag on both sides. A lot of landlords are really hardworking people, and a lot of these landlords, these mom and pops, they don't make anything at the end of the month. Nothing. They might make $50, but $100 max in many cases. Their costs are continuing to soar. So you start to look at this scenario. Who's really going to win? It's going to be these nonprofits and these government-backed agencies that are going to be acquiring these properties. A lot of these hedge funds, a lot of these family offices that are going to be operating in cooperation with them. You're going to start to see those people looking at their tenants as, hey, you're tenant number 164295. You're not going to get any type of anything. You're going to be basically a number in their book, and it's going to, I think, going to be a worse experience for the tenant in the long term. It's a bad situation. I mean, what industry has ever thrived where there was a monopoly, right? What industry? Whenever there's a monopoly, chaos unfolds. And it looks like, this monopoly that was predicted in 2020, according to Forbes, is right on time. It says, in fact, look at this. This is the backdrop of 2020 for the housing discussion. Quantitatively, dubious crisis perpetrated by landlords, developers, and the wealthy against the defenseless poor, disenfranchised people of color. Government, academics, and media do little or nothing to challenge this set of assumptions that are repeat with outrage. Indianapolis, for example, went on the span of the year of the 14th highest rate of evictions in the country, 14th, second after New York. The local press, without any substantiation, reported this last fact dutifully. Of course, the truth is that the U.S. consensus number to double-check the Eviction Lab's assessment of 7.27% of rental households were evicted in Indianapolis in 2017 yields a lower percentage, 5.9%. Is this an epidemic? We don't know because there is no endemic rate of eviction. How many evictions should there be? 0, of course. Remember, housing is a human right. So we're walking into, I believe, a dystopian world. The fact that this came out 4 years ago, 4 years ago, this isn't some tinfoil hat, no-name person. This is Forbes magazine. Forbes magazine saying this, making the same predictions that are unfolding today. They're unfolding today. You see what the money market accounts are doing, $6 trillion. See what the family offices are, getting ready to do, $9.5 trillion. The writing's on the wall, right? Everything is going to change, and I think that smart investors are paying very, very close attention to this change, and those that are going to be rewarded handsomely, and those that are not and ignoring the facts, I think, are going to get rug pulled with millions of others. What do you think about this entire situation? Let's have a conversation about this below. And if you'd like to fix your credit, we would love to help you at my company, GreatCreditFast.com. That's GreatCreditFast.com. If you have late payments, medical bills, charge-offs, foreclosures, bankruptcies, repossessions, or any negative or derogatory items on your credit report, go to GreatCreditFast.com. Click the link in the description just below this video. Schedule a free call for tomorrow. Catch you next video.